Hello, and welcome to Vacation Station, hosted by Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazines.com.
Everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio. You know, every fourth Saturday we get excited because we get to chat with one of our good friends, Glynn Burrows. He is a family history expert, a tour guide, and owner of Norfolk Tours in England. Now you can go to his website, norfolk-tours.co.uk. And there's a UK on there because he will take you anywhere around the UK, and he's going to prove that today, talking about visiting Wales, which he recently had a nice little vacation out there. And his article is up on blendradioandtv.com, but the link is in the show notes, as is his website. So it's all easy to access wherever you're watching or listening from. But honestly, looking at the photos and reading his article, it seems that this was an immersive nature and history experience. And Glynn got some more castles in and some exercise doing a lot of steps. How many steps? Did you have one of those things, Glynn, telling you I've done 10,000 steps? Because
No, my children both have them. Well, I say children, they're in their 30s, but they've always got, well, we've done our 10,000 steps. I know I've done enough steps when my leg aches. Then I know I've done enough steps. And we definitely did them.
Yeah, and the castle, which one? I can't pronounce where you were. I can't pronounce anything in your article, but what was the castle that you were doing all these steps?
Well, the castle that had most steps was at Carnarvon, because I think it had about 9 different towers, and each of the towers had their own steps. So we had to go up and down, up and down, up and down. And to get to the top of the castle, you had to go around lots and lots of these spiral staircases. And they are very, very narrow. And yeah, it's worth it in the end because you get lovely views.
Mm-hmm.
But going up and down spiral staircases is quite exhausting. In fact, by the end of it, Diane would say, well, go up to the top of that turret and take a photo of me down here. So there'd be Diane at the bottom and I'd be at the top taking
a nice excuse, right?
Yeah.
Nancy's always doing, hey, look at these lovely flowers down here. I want to go look at the garden. Well, doing these castles, and you're talking about a little bit about this in your article. We've been to Wales when we lived there. So this was in the early 80s. And I remember going to Wales, and, it's beautiful. Just like Scotland kind of both took our breath away. Like it was just, amazing. Yeah. But there was always some tie back to England. So can we kind of step back in time and look at how England, Scotland, and Wales at one time, they kind of were connected in royal families, right? Or am I really wrong?
Well, Scotland less so, because Scotland was completely separate up until 1602, 1603, when James I of England was also James VI of Scotland. So he combined the two. So although England and Scotland are together, originally they were sort of completely separate, sort of run on separate lines. But Wales Wales is a separate country, but it hasn't been separate as recently as that. Wales is much, much older, because Wales is its own country and it's got its own language, a completely different language. I mean, Scotland's got its own accent, which is a really different accent to England, but Wales has actually got its own language. So all of the street signs in Wales are in Welsh and English, and then all of everything you go to, the same as in Canada, where everything is in French and English. In Wales, you've got Welsh and English. And that's why most of the words of the places that I went to are not ones that you can easily pronounce, because they're not written in English, they're written in Welsh. So Carnarvon, we call it Carnarvon with a V. The Welsh call it Carnarvon with an F. The place that we were staying at was called Penmaemawr, which is a bit of a mouthful.
So that's a town, or is it like a village?
Very small town, right on the side of the sea. It was over our bed and breakfast was actually overlooking the Anglesey Island, which is behind you. So that was gorgeous. For instance, the tallest mountain in Wales, we call it Mount Snowdon, but the Welsh call it Weirwydfa, something like that, which is a completely different language. There is no tie-in with English and Welsh. There's a completely different language.
Wow,
so that's interesting. Wow. Even though we're in the same country, where there's a completely different way of life and language. It's quite amazing. You can go into enough. We were walking down the street in Conway, and Diane said to me, "I've just heard Welsh being spoken, naturally." And there were just a couple of blokes sitting outside a pub having a pint, and they were just chatting away in this language that we had no idea what they were talking about, because it was Welsh. So it is amazing.
So that's incredible to me, because you just think, oh, it's all going to be the same. That's like you go to France, they're speaking French, right?
Yeah.
So Europe has a gazillion languages and different places, and things have shifted borders over time with wars and things like that. But I mean, you've even got Ireland and Northern Ireland all connected, the Isle of Man, the Isle of Wight, the Channel Islands. And so all of this is connected in history to me in some way, because you're unified by geography in a way, even if you're separate islands, and not Scotland and Wales, but Isle of Man and all of that. But Ireland in some ways connected too, in a way, but they have their own, I mean, sometimes you can't understand them either, I love that personally. I love it when everybody has a different sound,
Yeah, I mean, Ireland has got their own language as well. I mean, a lot of it is more to do with the Gaelic language and the Celtic languages. So, I mean, they do say that Cornwall, Brittany, and Wales and Ireland are very similar in lots of ways, because they are sort of more of a Celtic language.
Okay.
But as I say, there is absolutely nothing that I can make sense of in Welsh. I mean, in French, the word for table in French written down is exactly the same as it is in English. But we say table, they say table.
Oh, well.
So there is the same commonality.
It's interesting to me, because even in Afrikaans, table is tafel. So it's still got this weird, we kind of I think all, like, through exploration, had these different languages that merged together. That's what I was saying. People didn't stay in their own little square for very long.
No.
And that's cool. I mean, it caused wars and destruction and all of that. But at the same time, I'm like, can we just have no country lines, no passport issues? Let's just all travel around merrily. That's, rose-colored glasses. But
I mean, that's what we did. We just went over the border. There is no checkpoint to go to Wales
for anyone, even
No. Wow. Once you're in England, you can go to Wales. There's just a sign that say Wales, and that's it. There is no border, apart from when you go over the border into Wales. You then realise that all of their signs are in Welsh, as well as English. So it's fascinating. But like I say, there is nothing in Welsh that is similar to English. But I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that, as it's a Celtic language, it predates the Romans. So you've got English and French are all got Roman base, haven't they? So the Welsh is more ancient. The Welsh language is more ancient than Roman.
Wow, that's amazing.
So therefore, it's got a completely different root. It hasn't got a Latin root to it.
Well, what about the food? Does the food change at all because of their ancient roots compared to? I mean, I know you're going to have scones and things. I remember going there and going into this little charming restaurant, and they still they gave me a glass of orange juice and they had little bitsies in it. And I didn't do well with bitsies as a young kid. So let's just leave it at that. And that's another story for another time. But I remember them having this beautiful basket of meringues and, kind of like what you would have with tea,
Yeah,
but it
yeah, yeah.
wasn't the same. It wasn't really the cucumber sandwiches, as maybe it's just my memory of being a
Right.
kid and seeing all the sweets, but it was like a lot of meringues. And even when we left, they went and took, and I was going to say in a serviette. Ooh, I'm remembering my English here. Uh, Wrapped it up as a little sweet treasure for me when we left because
Yeah.
I didn't do well with the bitsies and the orange juice. And they were just, I have to say, the most hospitable and kind people in that restaurant. But it
Hmm.
was so charming. Everything was so beautiful and lush and green and natural. And I mean, I remember as a kid knowing we were somewhere different, just the same as crossing into Scotland,
Yes.
you know?
I mean, the people, I mean, we met lots of lovely, friendly people. They were very, very friendly. Um, but I can't remember there being any specific different foods where we were,
Mm,
but we were in an area that had a lot of tourists. So
okay.
obviously, probably they cater for the tourism market rather
Mm,
than the local market.
mm,
And we didn't actually get to a market. I love to go to a local market when I go anywhere,
mm.
but we didn't get in a town when it was market day, sadly. But I mean, obviously,
Wait, I got to back up. Market is like our farmers market here. So,
yeah.
and some people call going to the market is like going to the grocery shop
Oh
here.
no, no, no. I mean an outdoor market
Yeah.
where all the local things go to, your local butchers and bakers and vegetable people, and all of those sort of people would go to a local market to sell local goods.
Mm,
And sadly, we weren't in an area where there was a market on the days we were there.
mm.
But what you can see behind you is the sea. So there is a lot of really lovely fresh fish. So that
Okay.
is that is a good thing about, well, it's a good thing about England and Wales and Scotland anyway, because we're never far from the sea. I mean,
Mm,
the one thing that really brought it home to me was the fact that I live on the east coast of England, and we went right across the entire country and through Wales to the west coast of the British Isles, and it only takes 5 hours to drive.
it's
Well, that's
amazing,
the
isn't it?
entire country of England and Wales is 5 hours to drive across. So
Wow.
that really does put into context how easy it is to get around the British Isles. Even if
Yeah.
I wanted to go to the north of Scotland, I could do that in a couple of days.
So, so somebody could say, I want to go rent a car and do a month in
Yeah,
the British Isles, right? Would you help them, like if they want to have their own experience, but would you help them just even plot out what they're doing to give them some local
oh
insight,
yeah,
maybe meet them at
yeah,
certain points, or if they're wanting to hike it, like the whole coastline or something
yeah.
crazy,
I have
that
done
would be
that.
cool.
Yeah, I've done that for people who have just contacted me and said, "Can you give me some suggestions about how I get to such a place
Hmm.
or such a place?" And also recommendations about where to stay and how to
Hmm.
find the good places and how to avoid the, not so good places. So yeah, I mean, helping people, in my country is what I do. It's
Mm.
it's it's just because, at the end of the day, obviously I want to get customers, but what I really want is I want people to enjoy the real England and Wales and Scotland and
And
Ireland.
And the English hospitality that
I
and
want,
the
yeah,
people.
exactly. I want them
Yeah.
to see the real country. I don't want
Hmm.
them to, well, yeah, they can go to London, obviously, but if you go to London, like any other capital, it's going to be like any other capital. Apart from obviously you've got the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace, but actually it's very, very international. If you want to see a real country, you've got to go to the places like as behind me and
Hmm.
behind you, where you're in the middle of the countryside and you're mixing with local people who are speaking a local language or in a
Well,
local.
I just had that experience. Well, where we are now, where we're recording from, we're up in the Appalachian region of America,
Right.
right? And now the Appalachian region spans more than 5 hours. Okay, so we're part of the Smoky Mountain Range, the Blue
Wow.
Mountains, right? The Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah.
Part
I
of the
love that. I
Appalachian
love that.
Trail.
I must interrupt. That was one of my favorite songs from Laurel and Hardy, the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia.
Oh, they see exactly. And we've got different states that are all connected.
Oh, right.
Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, all connected in this, you know, topography that is amazing. And right now we're outside a town called Burnsville, and it's a small little mountain town, they call it. But we're out in the countryside in the national forest, the Pisgah National Forest. So we've been seeing deer every day.
Yeah.
Lots of frogs and birds, fungus, mushrooms. Now everybody knows I'm addicted to mushrooms, not eating them and doing weird stuff or smoking them, anything like that. I'm in love with their formations and colors and just the magic of them.
Yeah.
Not that magic, but there's this thing. And so when you drive around, you're seeing his, like, this whole region has these, and we need to do a show connecting back to, because Irish history is huge. Scottish
Yes.
history is here. It's very huge. And they have these little coves named after these ancient families that have been here. So you got
Yeah.
to think Appalachian music, a lot of it also came back from where you've been traveling through.
Yeah.
Wales, England, Ireland, Scotland, it's all connected in some way here. And these people came out and settled in the middle of nowhere in these forests that the humidity and heat is not what you had in England, but some of the forest stuff is, like mushrooms and being able to make moonshine, I suppose, was part of it. And this is the area where moonshine came from. And
Right.
well, the whole country did it, but this is where the bootleggers were in North Carolina, and that's how we have
Okay.
NASCAR racing. Came from the bootleggers back in the day running moonshine across state lines.
Right.
So anyway, going back to what you were saying, it was my point is you go out and you start meeting people, and some of them have these, giant old barns, some of them are dilapidated, some of them are really ancient families whose roads are named after ancestry. You go into the store. I went into a new store, and everyone talks to you. And
Yeah.
I was talking to the guy, and he was having a hard time because I bought some wine, and he wanted to know my birthday. So I gave it to him, and I could tell he was having a hard time inputting it into the computer. And he was a young guy. And I said, "Oh, do you need me to give it again?" He goes, "No, I'm just really slow at doing math." And I said, "Well, how can I help you?" He's like, "No, no." And then he goes, "The way this machine, the till, is it a till in this country?" Now, see, I've gone English. Register, cash register is backward in how it does the year before the day. And I
All
said, "Well,
right.
then it must be English." He's like, "Really?" And I said, "Oh, no." I said, "Well, I really appreciate you, asking my birthday, because, I'm really about to hit a big mark in the next year or so. And this is making me feel fantastic." So I
I
was just
bet.
making him laugh because he got all nervous. He's a young bloke. And he said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I've never had wine before." And I said, "Well, don't start." I said, "It's all good in friends and family, but you don't need to." He goes, "No." He says, "I've never thought of it doing it." He says, "And I'm only 17 anyway." So I said, "You're 17." I said, "Oh." I said, "Are you still in school at this time, or is this the age group because I left early at 17." He goes, "No, I'm behind, ma'am." I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "No, it's because," he says, "quite honestly, I have a hard time learning. I don't understand the accents here." He says, for example, they could either say, if they're going to use the word fire, it's fire or fire, and it's the accents. And he says, "So I take a long time in school to understand what people are saying." And I said,
Hmm.
"Well, it just takes time." And I got in trouble in England. I was in trouble in school all the time for
Yeah.
myself, and I wrote myself instead of myself, in spelling. So I said, it takes time. We just had this communication, and I walked out thinking, wow, this is some interesting dialogue of a region where a child is not understanding their own accent, and he has that accent.
Mm.
What was that? And having slowing down to have a conversation where in most day and age people are so uppity and mean and rude to the person and they didn't have any self checkouts by the way.
Oh, thank God for that.
I know. And we had a conversation, and I made
Isn't
him
that
feel better
lovely?
about himself and just keep growing.
Yeah,
And he made me have a chuckle and realize I went through the same thing as a kid of understanding.
yeah,
And I said,
yeah.
well, don't feel bad. I said, everyone has a new way, has their way of learning, and education systems are having to learn, like, each student has a different way of taking it in. And it's kind of a new thing for people to learn. So don't feel bad. I didn't want him to
Yeah.
feel bad.
I mean, it is all about meeting locals, forming relationships with real people, and just being part of wherever you are. And that is what travel should be all about. I mean, what is the good? I mean, I see it so often. People, go on a whatever, an organized trip, and they get on a bus with all the people who are staying at their hotel. They get bussed to a travel place, an attraction. They all get off the bus. They look around the attraction for half an hour. They then get back on the bus again and go back to their hotel. They haven't actually seen anything of the real country or real place.
Mm-hmm.
All they've seen is the hotel, which is probably one of those spit and cardboard hotels. They've gone to a tourist attraction, and then they've come back to the spit and cardboard hotel. It's not what they need to be. They need to be out there and experience where they are. In my opinion,
Yeah, and you went
that's
over,
what I like.
you did the big drive of 5 hours, right? But didn't it feel good to know that you're going on an adventure? I always say that if you're going to travel somewhere, 5 hours is one of those perfect 4 to 5 to 6, up to 8
Yeah,
hours makes you feel like you've gone further enough away from your house that you're somewhere completely new.
and we
And it's
were.
not it, yeah, you were, and you were in a different country on the other side of it. And
Yeah,
going to Wales, so there's a familiarity, but not. And going back to the history, you mentioned some English royalty that was there, and I remember that doesn't didn't Princess Diana have roots in Wales? And I always kept going, well, how does this all work? Or am I messing it up? I know.
yeah. Prince William and Kate, they used to live on Anglesey, which is the island behind you,
Where the
because
puffins
he
are.
was. Yeah, well, no, not on that island, on the main island, because where
Oh, okay.
if you were sitting on the floor where you are there, you're actually on Anglesey. Behind your head is Puffin Island, which is a
Well, I'm
little
telling you,
little
the
tiny.
floor is a little rough. My butt hurts.
Yeah, it
It's
would
a
do,
little
and it
jaggedy
and it
there.
would be it would be quite wet as well, because there was a lot of
Okay.
spray in that
Oh,
area. Anyway, Prince William actually served in the RAF helicopters that were based on Anglesey. So he lived in on Anglesey at one point. But it's the same country, but it's an area. Funnily enough, it's an area that I've never been to before. I'm 64 and I've never been to Wales. I've lived
did
in
you feel? What
England.
did it feel like? I know you studied in France, you worked in France,
Yeah, yeah.
So now what's it like going to a new country so close to you and experiencing it like with fresh eyes?
Oh, I want to go back.
Mm,
It really is such a beautiful area, and it's got so much history, and the castles that we went to see are so well preserved. That they've all got insides. I mean, a lot of our castles were completely demolished, so there's just ruins. A lot of the Welsh castles are actually still buildings. Like Carnarvon Castle, as you can see from the pictures, there are
mhm.
ruins, but a lot of the rooms are still rooms that you can actually go into.
Wow.
And they were built by Edward the First. You're
Mm,
talking about the 1200s. You know, it's a long while ago. It's
mhm.
what, 800 years ago.
And
You
so
know,
they have these castles and the moats and everything, and so they had to be prepared for wars and attacks. Who
well, the
would
thing,
be? Yeah.
a lot of this, you see, was to for the English, who were then taking over Wales. So it was to protect the English from the Welsh. So these castles were built by English kings who were coming to Wales to take over Wales. So that's why there are so many castles.
That's where I'm getting all muddled up. Okay. Now the English built castles in Wales, in a different country, to protect themselves from the people that they want to attack.
Exactly. And
Oh
also
my God, Glynn.
along the border between England and Wales, there are a load of castles as well, because there were always people in Wales and people in England who were trying to fight each other, because obviously the English want to take over Wales and the Welsh wanted to tell them to go away. So obviously they're building castles to try and protect their own borders.
Yeah. So when you're talking about these really massive castles with
Yes.
these towers that go, you have to go up and down. So when it comes to staff and even the army, right? Because I remember there was always people up at the top where there were little holes to put your arrows and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Up at the top, that you couldn't have one person running from one side of the castle back and forth, because that doesn't make, I mean, they did, but not like, you had to have basically people in different parts of the castle that maintained that part of the castle, right? So that's but there weren't even servants really, were they? Or are they slaves? Or
well, yeah, you had the army. The army would be based within the castle, but you would also have servants and just generally people who would be looking after the people who lived there. But there was a way to communicate all the way around the castle, because at the top of the wall you could actually walk all the way around. But if you wanted, because you've got all these great big towers, so if you want to look at each tower, you've got to go up and down these stairs. So although you can, if you wanted to just walk around the wall, you could. But if you wanted to look at each tower, you had to go up and down all these spiral staircases to get into each of the rooms within each of the towers.
That's what I was saying. So if someone stayed in that one spiral, right? So you have rooms on that. They're the ones maintaining that section. So like the army, like that's your position. You're gonna one person sleeps downstairs, the other one goes up to hold guard, right?
Yeah, and then you could communicate with the others by walking around the top of the wall. And the king and the queen and their entourage would have their own tower, and that would be looked after by their servants. And then within the castle there would be kitchens, a massive hall where they would eat. Then there would be, obviously there'd be a well, because the most important thing in a castle is the well, because you need water. There'd be everything you need.
What about going to the bathroom?
Yes, there would be, and there were actually.
I mean, where did plumbing come in? I mean, because plumbing was not the same.
No, we're not talking plumbing. We're talking about a hole in the wall that would, if you used it, it would go straight down outside the castle.
Into the moat?
Into the moat, or on top of people who were standing at the bottom of the chute.
Oh, now that's kind of funny. That's kind of funny.
I must tell you this story. At Norwich Castle, there is a part of the wall which has got the chutes that come down from the royal toilets that were up there. And we're always, when I take a group of children there, I always talk to them about different things. And with children, obviously, toilets are the funniest thing. And there's always one or two children who are a little bit unruly. So I normally get them to go and stand near the wall, and then we have a discussion about toilets, and then we have a laugh to think that that's where the toilet's emptied out,
So this is where the term poop chute actually comes from.
It could well be.
I swear. I mean, I always said, who came up with the word chute, and it's funny, but now it's in my, now I have a whole visual that I don't need to have, but thank you. But I mean, if you think about that, I mean, that was medieval times. I always thought about how slop would end up in the streets and people were walking over it, and the moats couldn't have been that. I mean, they had to keep the moats. They filled them with water, right? The moat was another
Not necessarily.
form.
The moat was a form of defense, but you didn't necessarily have it filled with water. because the castle would be on a hill, which is called a motte, and then you got the moat. Let's try and do it right. So you got the moat like that, and the castle like that. So if you went into the moat, you'd have to climb up a very steep hill. That is really what the moat was. Sometimes they were full of water, and sometimes they weren't. But you try climbing up a hill like that when you've got people throwing things at you. It's not easy.
Yeah. No,
especially if it's stewy.
Yeah, I have a little dog taking me up and down hills in the Appalachian Mountains, and all I'm telling you is, Lucy, stop it. Like you're gonna have to drag me just now. I mean, I even hear cars trying to make it up.
Yes. But you see, this is one of the things that I always like to do with people who come and visit, is for them to actually see what they've read about. Because until you actually see what a Motte and Bailey castle looks like, or until you actually see a castle from the 13th century, you haven't really got an idea of the scale, of the building material, of the style of everything. I've told you that you had to go up and down these spiral staircases, but until you've actually climbed a spiral staircase, you haven't really got an idea about what it's like. So that's why an experience like that is so important, because it then puts it all into context.
I agree.
It's a bit like you're telling me that where you are, is really hot and sticky, and they got lots of mushrooms, but I don't have that much hot and sticky weather here, so I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like living in a jungle. I've never lived in a jungle.
Well, it's not quite jungly, but it's weird because it does cool down in the evenings. So it's got this warm, and then it's got because we get this they call it the Smoky Mountains because it looks like smoke coming through in the mornings. So then eventually it lifts off, and it's almost like a half rainforest. So this fog comes in,
right,
and you can walk under the trees, and it sounds like it's raining, and there's drops coming down, but it's not raining. It's all the fog coming off. And so that's why all the mushrooms come up. And then by noon, it heats up. So you've got this really, and sometimes it's not as hot, and sometimes it goes dry, and you go, you know what? I want the moist because I want the mushrooms. But but it's really a very interesting climate here with that, because you can go in the forest and cool right down. There's creeks and streams and moss growing everywhere, and
lovely.
I mean, there's butterflies everywhere. It's like a little magic land. And so when I was thinking about, people from Ireland and Scotland and coming over here, moving here, I could see where there's a resemblance to England for me in some of this countryside. Maybe not, it would be like a really hot Indian summer in England, but because there's things growing, berries and all of that, I think it's really quite magical. And I think it has some resemblances to your general greater vicinity, let's put it that way, of all of the UK.
But until you experience something, you haven't really got an idea of what it's like.
No, I read books about this area for years. In fact, a gentleman, Peter Jenkins, he hiked the Appalachian Trail, and he's hiked Africa. He's hiked all these places, just get on and he was in this area, and he was like, no, I'm going to learn. And he trained out with his dog. And this was in the early 70s. And I've read all his books as, growing up. And I always wanted to come here because of his writing. And then you're here and you're like, he's one of the best writers to me and photographers. And it pales in comparison to being here. There's nothing like it. And to have an immersive experience and be around, being able to talk to people about it, like the place where we are, they're very pro animals. They have wildlife cams, and there's a bear running around out here, which you can hear. And I had to haul with the dog because we're walking, we hear this kaboom, and we're like, run, the bear's coming,
Don't run.
And we had enough space to do it. And I was like, this is the joy of life, is having these true experiences and seeing the locals live very there's a place in Smoky Mountains National Park. You go up a hill, there's a whole little, and I mean whole community that lives within the park that has been there before the park became a park, that has just gone from generation to generation, with a
Yeah.
chapel, with houses, with a little mini library. And you're like, how did it's Cades Cove? How did this happen? So then you want to research people. There's cemeteries within these mountains, private and then bigger ones. And so I think it's very connected to what you have going on in your region, in that the ancestry, but like you're saying, going somewhere and really connecting with people's roots is, you can't beat it. It's really
No,
amazing.
I think that, as it's always that you get the feeling of a place, and you can't read about it, you can't see it on a film, you can't see it in photos, you can't hear it in the music. You've got to actually be there and feel it, and you're part of it, and you can experience it. I mean, walking up a spiral staircase in a castle, you've got the smell, you've got the feel of the stone, you've got the feel of the steps with under your feet. You've got so many of your senses being bombarded with stuff, and that is what all these sorts of things are all about. It's all about experiencing a real complete feeling of being somewhere. And we went to Wales for the week, and the amount of different things that we experienced in Wales, we just want to go back. It is just lovely.
And what about the road trip there? What about the road trip there and going through parts of England and other parts of Wales that you hadn't been to get to your destination?
I mean, we obviously stopped off a few times, especially at our age. But actually, we stopped off on the way back at another place, which I'm going to write about for another article, which is a living museum. And that is amazing, because it is in one of the early parts of England that were the sort of the formation of the iron trade. And it's absolutely amazing, and they've got a Victorian village, or a small Victorian town, that has been recreated in this area. So you've got cart horses, you've got people in the shops, you've got everything going on as it would have been about 1900. So
that's one of the best ways to understand. That is one of the best ways, especially for kids,
Yeah, and for children of 64 as well.
When I'm 64.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think it's cool. I mean, and then they show how you churn butter and how you actually smell things.
Make candles, printing. There's everything there.
Did they have little pigs and things like that running around?
They had animals. They had an old-fashioned fairground. They had the old-fashioned schools. Yeah, everything. But like I say, this is for the next article.
I won't get ahead of myself.
I took loads of pictures, and I've even got some videos of it as well. So awesome. I mean, it's really immersive, but it is all about being somewhere. You can read about it, you can watch it on the videos, you can see it on the television, but it's not like being there. It's really amazing. So if you've got connections with Wales, the best way to learn about it is to go to Wales.
Awesome. I'm going to be interested to hear about family history, getting into Wales with a different language and trying to trace roots that way too. Because the chances are you could have family in Wales and England, right? It can happen.
Very much so. Very much so. What happened quite a lot was that Wales were mainly sort of in the coal mines. There was a lot of coal mines in Wales and a lot of labourers. And obviously around the coast, you've got a lot of fishermen. But a lot of people left Wales and came to England, especially to sort of places like London and Birmingham, to get work. When work ran out in the countryside, they came to England and to get jobs. But the problem with Welsh family history is there are some names in Wales that are so common that it's nigh on impossible. Like the name Jones just about every village in Wales has got a Jones family.
Like
And
Tom.
yeah, exactly.
He's Welsh.
Yeah, exactly. So is Shirley Bassey. She's Welsh as well. But you know, Jones is one of the names that if you've got a Welsh connection, you're very lucky if you can trace your family back any distance, because it's so common.
Wow,
But
amazing.
you've got to try.
I love it.
DNA is good for that.
Yeah, that helps. That helps. But yeah, I mean, we've got Smith over here, so
Well,
look
that
at my
as well.
last name.
But it's even
They
worse
always
for
make the
Jones.
joke, Smith and Jones.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
It's
whole
better than
point.
Smith and Wesson. I don't want to shoot anyone.
I used to love that program on in the 70s. Alas, Smith and Jones. I think, well, it was made in America, wasn't it?
We need Steve Schneikert here for this, man. I have
Yeah,
no
yeah.
clue.
What was it? Ben Murphy and Paul Dewell played Smith and Jones. Yeah, it was a fantastic program.
I'll ask Steve. I have no clue. He's going to give me a big rundown.
Sadly, Pete Dewell died really, really young. But
Oh. Oh, well, there you go. Well, I thought everything was BritBox. Listen, they can't go wrong with that over here.
Look it up. Alas, Smith and Jones.
I will. I will. Now, I want to know, do you have BritBox in England?
Probably. I don't know. It's no good asking me about modern things like that.
Well, it's like Netflix, but it's all British.
I don't know. I haven't got Netflix, so I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't watch a lot of television.
I can't. Anything I watch is more like documentaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some good British comedy. Bring me Hyacinth Bouquet any day.
You've got to watch Hyacinth.
Everybody has to watch. Keeping Up Appearances. Well, Glynn, always fun to have you on the show. And Glynn was also on our recent artificial intelligence panel. And even just saying artificial intelligence makes me giggle. And then I was like, we're doing a panel on artificial intelligence. Doesn't mean our guests have artificial intelligence. They're all intelligent. But anyway, so check that out on bigblendradio.com. Glynn is here every fourth Saturday. Again, the link to his article is in the show notes, as well as his website. But his website is norfolk-tours.co.uk. And I encourage you to go visit him. You go to England or anywhere in that vicinity, you've got to call Glynn, and he'll help you out. He also helps people with their family history and tracing the roots back to England. And of course, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Until next time. So we're going to do living history next time. Sounds like fun, Glynn.
We are definitely going to do living history, and it's really fascinating.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glynn.
Speak to you later.